Welcome everybody. Today we're going to take a look at adding a comment section to our moderation items. Right, so in order to moderate an item or a particular piece of content in a community, we want more than one person looking at it and giving their feedback, right? So if somebody spots that something's off, they can just go ahead and leave a comment, or if they think everything is fine, they leave a comment, whatever, or whatnot, you know. That's the way that they're going to communicate. So again, we're going to start in the C# land, and then we're going to, through the controller, migrate into our Nuxt application, and again, just slowly build up simple examples until we can connect them all into a fully featured working moderation page. Okay, so again, going into the models, let's go ahead and add a class. This class will be a comment. This can be just a base model with an integer. Let's go ahead and have some content in here. And just to kind of make this episode a little bit more interesting than just adding another record to the database, we're going to do a little bit of regex, right? So it's not necessarily a tutorial on regex, but just to let you know what kind of things can be possible with regex and how you can use them, right? So in a lot of comments today, you can tag people, right? So you can tag somebody's username, and then you can have a link and whatnot. And we're going to do the same, right? So we're going to say that you can tag other users on the platform. So let's go ahead and bring in HTML content, okay? So when the comment is submitted, we're going to have an add tag, and HTML content is going to be generated and stored into the database. So when we validate the content, we're then going to scan the content for usernames, and we are going to convert that to HTML content with the links to those usernames, or perhaps to links to the relative comment that we're replying to. But again, this can be some kind of metadata on the comment itself. Here we got the comment. We're not going to tie it to any parent. So what we're basically saying is the comment can belong anywhere. And if we go into our moderation item, all we're going to do is we are going to supply an list of comments. These are going to be comments. Let's make sure we import this stuff. New list of comments, and that's it, right? Let's just not forget to initialize this thing. So once we get the comment, let's go ahead and add the comments to our database, right? So let's just copy this row here. Gonna put the comments, and that's it. Now we are storing comments in our database. Let's go ahead into our controller. Here I'm gonna go into the moderation item controller, okay? Because this is where we're going to be grabbing comments for this item, and we're going to be creating comments for this item, right? So I'm not going to be creating a dedicated comments controller until maybe we have threads that are contained within the comment or replies to a comment, right? Because then we're dealing with creating comments for comments kind of thing. So let's go ahead and, well, I mean, let's get this done, right? So first things first, we want to be able to list comments for a particular moderation item. Everything pretty much stays the same, except let's copy this once, because we already kind of know that we will need to do a little where clause here and not provide the first or default. So because we're going to go into the moderation item and we're going to yank the comments out, okay? We want to also include the comments that we are selecting, and then we want to select the actual comments, okay? And then what we're going to return is an IEnumerable, so a list of comment, and that's it. So we're gonna get comments, and that's about it. So as far as queries goes, it's pretty normal. If this isn't generating a good enough SQL query, we can always add a little bit of logging maybe later on, just to see what kind of a SQL queries this does generate, and making sure that this is efficient. And if this is not efficient, we might resolve to putting a moderation ID and other IDs to which the comments can relate. But again, I don't want to necessarily do that. So let's go ahead and close that. Now, for the creation of the comment, so we want a post. And same thing, we are going to be posting to an ID, and we are going to be creating a comment. So this is going to be a task of action result, because this can return bad result, or let's just call this comment as an action, and etc. Right, better result or okay or no content. Right, if you just post a comment to a moderation item that doesn't exist, but again, that kind of involves having access to or trying to access the API via something like a HTTP client rather than the client that we provide. Okay, so we want to guard ourselves there. So let's go ahead and pass the ID, and then from the body we will actually for now just grab the comment. Okay, at the end we're just going to return okay with the comments that we created. And what we want to do is let's get our mod item, so our moderation item. So moderation items, first or default, we want to just grab the ID. Okay, and then on the mod items, on the comments, we want to go ahead and add the comment, right? Nothing too crazy. And then context, save changes async, and there it is. So now the thing around generating the HTML content and saving. So I personally think it could be a little bit better if we could reliably generate this HTML content on the client. So we're going to use the processing power of our user's machine instead of our server, and we're going to avoid accidental states. So this HTML content is accidental state, and accidental state is a cause of many potential issues. But the trade-off is that you can kind of have performance, right? Because we do this once and that's it, it's done. So if we could just return the content and the Nuxt client can sort of regenerate this HTML content, that's sort of the ideal situation where you have source of truth and any data that you need, you can always just generate it, because then you avoid having to save accidental state. But in this case, I think it's just overall easier to live with this accidental state, because we're going to do our validation here and we're just going to stuff it in this HTML content. Okay, so let's go ahead and bring up Regex and see what we can do in terms of yanking out tags from a comment, right? So what I do is I go to something like Regex 101 and I just type in, so this is some comment, hi at user, my email is lol@email.com, or maybe or let's say and tagging at a user, a underscore user. And now what we want to do is we want to match these usernames, right? And for good measure, let's also do something like a 8123, right? So what do we do? The first thing that I kind of do is when I need to yank a particular thing out is you make a group, right? So the angle brackets are like a group, right? So a string of characters is going to try to fit this particular description, and then we're going to be able to grab this particular group, right? So super simple. What we can do is we can say that this group should contain letters from A to Z. They can also be uppercase, so this is probably something that we should test for. And you can see how it highlights these things. So we can say that at the moment these are all individual characters because they are not highlighted in sort of in one continuous color. You can see the white spaces in between them. So what we're going to do is we're going to say that we also allow numbers from 0 to 9. So these get highlighted now as well. And what I will say is that I will put a star. So star means 0 or more. So now you can see more or less the continuation in the color. So another thing that we want to allow are underscores and dashes as well. So let's go ahead, put a dash and an underscore. So now what we want to do is we want to say that it should start with an @ okay? And here we are. So pretty much we are saying that this group starts with an @ and then it may contain these characters, 0 or more. Now let's say, what if we are trying to tag something like an @ right? We actually don't want that. So let's go ahead and say 1 or more, right? So if somebody puts an A here, this instantaneously becomes valid. So if somebody just puts an empty @ this is not something that we want to consider as a username. So we put a plus instead of a star. So star is 0 or more of any of from these collections, and plus is 1 or more. So as you can see here, the last sort of part of this is that the email is getting highlighted. So we want to avoid this sort of situation where we perhaps are highlighting some kind of email or something that's basically preceded with a word. So let's go ahead and use a \b. And with Regex 101, it's in this panel that I am covering. Hi. The quick reference here, if you go to anchors, you can, and basically all different sections, you can see what each individual characters do. So for \big B, this is a non-word boundary. So here you can see that as soon as we put in some kind of boundary that's not a word, so you can see how here we have a comma separator, and it still detects detects the username, but if it is a word, it doesn't, right? So here we have our regex expression. Let's go ahead and bring this into our comment section, right? So let's go ahead and grab it. What we will do is, for now, we will just create a regex here. If somebody is out there already knows how to use C# regexes, hold up with the static compiled and everything, we are going slow, okay? Let's go ahead and create this regex expression. And another thing, what we will do is we'll just put a @ here, so it will be a little bit easier for us to read this, because if we don't put a @ we will have to like escape backslashes to make sure that they're passed as backslashes to the regex, okay? But so basically just put a @ here so it works as we typed it in Regex 101, right? So we have a regex, and now what we want to do is find all the matches in the content submitted, and for each match, add a link instead of that tag with the href to that user, right? So let's go ahead and do this. First of all, what I will do is I will grab the HTML content, and I will just assign the original content to it, right? So this will just make it a little bit easier. Next thing, what I will do is I will grab the actual regex matches where I will pass the content, okay? So what we're doing here is we are trying to match, we're trying to find all of these groups. Same as, imagine if this was the comment that we're passing, we are trying to find all of these matches. So what we're gonna get is an iteration of all these matches. One thing that you can do in C# is name your groups as well. So inside your group, right when it starts, we'll do a question mark and we'll open brackets, and I'll just call this tag, okay? So what this will let me do is for each match, let's go ahead and grab the match. It will conveniently let me select that particular group instead of relying on some sort of an index, okay? So let's go ahead and we will extract this tag from there. So in the match, and looks like we're missing some methods. Let's go ahead and explicitly cast this to match. So match is just a type that should be returned, but it's not. But essentially what we have here are groups in this match. So because you can have multiple groups, so imagine if we did something like this, right? So now we should be able to grab the tag, and if we had like tag 1 here, we will be able to grab tag 1 here as well, right? Otherwise you will be using indexes, and that's not comfortable, right? So we just want to sort of say, right, we're using tag here, grab this tag from the matched groups, because that's primarily what we're trying to match, okay? So once we get the tag, what we can do is we can grab the comment, HTML content, and let's go ahead on the content. Let's replace that particular tag with some HTML, right? So we're gonna say A here, and I think that's a closing tag, and I think, is this an object as well? Groups tag. All right, we have to grab the value, sorry. All right, so we got the value. Let's go ahead and put the tag in here. And then before we sanitize this, we will just say tag it in here as well, and something like user link, right? So once we actually do have users, this is what we're going to do, right? So iteratively, this process, we will slowly build up this HTML content. If you want a different way to kind of do this through link statements, let me actually show you here as well, because I think this is a very good example of where the aggregate link statement can be used. I know a lot of people are probably wondering about the aggregate statement, like where is the actual use case kind of thing, right? But this is pretty much where this can be used. So let me show you how this can be used. What we'll essentially have is we will have a collections, right? So again, we're just gonna have a bunch of matches, and again, we're just gonna pass the content in here. And what we want to do is we want to aggregate it. Okay, so what we're gonna have is the content coming in and the match as well. So the original content that we start with is the comment.content. Okay, so that's going to be the first thing that's going to be supplied. And then we want to do something in order to return that content as well. Okay, so at the moment we're not doing much, but we essentially want to be doing the same thing. And here, you can grab whatever you prefer, okay? Whichever solution that is. So let's go ahead, grab this, and we will do the assignment here. Let's drop aggregate to the new line. I'll format this a little bit. And instead of just a simple return statement here, we will do the same. We will just grab the tag first, and then what we're going to return is this bit here. So return, and again, just format this a little bit. Maybe put this on one line. I know it's kind of sliding out. Maybe not put this on one line, still sliding out. And I mean, this is probably a little bit more readable. As a general application of aggregate, this is how you can use it instead of having this for loop where you first assign the content to the HTML content and then you can work with the HTML content. Here you start with comment content and you end up with HTML content, okay? And here that was a little bit bad. What we want to be using is content here. So the content that we're passing in, this content is going to get replaced and we're going to return this content, and then the next function, the returned content is going to be next, and then we're approaching to the next match and we're replacing the next tag over and over, okay? And I mean, as the HTML goes, it's pretty self-explanatory. I am going to go with the aggregate because I'm a hipster, okay? And we will leave it at this, and maybe this drop down will be fitting more or less on one line. I think that's all right. Let's see if we can drop this down. Cool. Yeah, there we go. The perks of having a very zoomed in screen. I know. Let's put that back. I really don't mind. So, spend an abnormally a large amount of time on this, but essentially extraction of tags and basically putting the tags as hrefs on there, right? This might be not a good decision right now. It seems fine. If it becomes a problem, we will change it later, okay? Let's move forward. So let's go ahead into our pages, into the moderation, into the type, and into ID, right? So this is where we want to grab all of the comments, and we also here we want to be able to create these comments. So one thing that we actually don't have here that I didn't account for is the actual moderation ID item. So this ID, we don't actually have it here. The ID that we have here is for the trick and the type, right? So it's to resolve that pointer. We don't actually have the ID that is pointing to the moderation item. So this is something that we want to pass as well. So let's go into the index here. And what we will do is we'll just add another additional parameter where we're just going to have the ID. And at this point, you can argue, do we really need this information here of the type and the target? I don't think so, but again, in terms of how we're going to be fetching the data, it might just make it a little bit harder, so I think it's okay to keep this here. So let's go ahead and make sure that we account for this change in our folders. So let's go ahead and add a directory, and then here I'll just add a mod ID folder. I will control copy the underscore type and put it into mod ID, and I'll rename the ID to trick ID, right? And what this will not allow me to do, but I will have to now do, is I'll go into trick ID, and first I will need to replace this with trick ID, right? So now instead we're grabbing trick ID here. What I will also do is I will no longer have this as a fetch, because moderation items, they're not really for discovery. These are already for people that are logged in, moderators that know what the website is. We don't need any server-side rendering here. This is what should be in a typical spa application, right? So let's just go ahead, stick this in a created. We don't need the await here, because what I want to do is I want to make this kind of a fire and forget. And once I do get the item on the back, all I will do is I'll say this item, and let's say, is this possible? Is this valid JavaScript? I think it is. Cool. So that will happen, and without waiting for this to finish, we want to kick off the next request to grab the comments, right? So let's go ahead and grab our list of comments. And I'll also just create a property for where we're going to store the comment, right? So just a string. So for the comments, what we want to do is for the endpoint, we want to go into the moderation items controller. Let's grab that endpoint. We'll put it here. And now we actually want to grab the mod ID here. Let's grab it from the URL parameters and put it here, right? And what we're actually are after are the comments. So let's go ahead and make sure that we grab the comments, and the comments that are going to be coming through here, let's go ahead and make sure we assign them to this array. So these two are going to happen simultaneously, so we don't wait for one request to finish or to start the next one. So these may complete in different orders as well. Let's go ahead and display these comments, and we'll also create a field for capturing the comment, right? So let's create a div. We'll just have a simple v4, a c in comments, and then what we're gonna use is a vhtml tag where we can pass the HTML content, and this will take care of rendering the links properly, etc. Okay, so we can actually close this div off here. Let's put one on the top, and in here what I will have is a let's get this IntelliSense in vText field, where I will just vmodel a comment, and let's just put a sneaky label in here that says comment, and then let's have a v button in here as well. We'll say send, and then we just want to send this comment, right? Let's get the methods in here, send, and then let's just make sure we grab this. Again, the mod ID, we can either store it in a parameter, or we can just, you know, re-grab it from the URL. No biggie. Let's just grab it from the URL again. And here what we're going to be doing is posting to this particular ID. And again, this is going to be posting to /comments. So actually that should have stayed there. This will be changing to $post. And what we're going to get back is actually a comment, right? So when this all goes through, we're getting back a comment. So instead of equaling this, let's go ahead and push this comment on here. Okay, and that should be it. So once this completes, this should be executed, and the comment is going to be added to the list. So let's go ahead and see if it works, if we're getting any errors. So backend seems fine, front end seems fine. Let's jump over here, give this a refresh, get the console open. Trusty console, moderation, forwards roll. So this is a test for forwards roll. Okay, awesome. Let's do a test, a send, and uncut. So 415, it's usually indicating that the data that we send is invalid format. So let's go ahead and check that we are using the from body. So that means we are planning on receiving JSON in this comment format. And now let's go ahead and check what we're actually sending, which is nothing, right? So the error is fully justified. What do we actually want to assign? Let's go ahead and take a look at the comment, and we just want to assign the content. So let's go ahead and say that this content equals to this comment, okay? And I guess maybe it's worth dropping this down to a new line. Yeah, cool. So let's go ahead and test this. Let's send this again. I think I will need to give this a refresh. Cool. And there it is. So let's go ahead and give this another test. And there we have the test. So if we refresh the page, these should get loaded after the initial requests. Okay. Now let's test the users. I at user. Go ahead, send this. And there we go. So we get back HTML. Again, if we refresh, let's go ahead and go to the user link, right? So this should be the href on there. So let's go ahead and take a look at this link. There it is, href user link. So we don't even put a slash on there or anything. I mean, like right there. Let's go ahead and test multiples one, right? Because we have an aggregate, we should have a multiple. Can at user1 and at user2, and we can do a little bit of helping on the front end in terms of who we're trying to tag. But again, this is a bit of a more complicated thing to do, and it should probably deserve an episode in itself. Here we are just testing the functionality that we've implemented here, like user tagging and just leaving comments. All right, so let's go ahead, send this, and here we have it. Both of these are indeed links. Okay, as I mentioned before, we might grab that logic and might put it in the web client, or we might stick with a current approach. We will see how it goes as we're developing this comment section a little bit further, but I'm pretty sure it will turn out well. This will be it for this episode. Thanks for watching. Let me change the background so you can see my face. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. I'm pretty sure everybody who's following these episode series is subscribed. If you have any questions, make sure to leave them in the comment section. I also stream on Wednesdays and Sundays. Links to my Twitch and also Discord channel where I do a lot of updates are in the description, so don't forget to check that. And I'll see you in my other episodes.